We are going to have a bunch of fun in this lesson and create this super stretchy bendy rig. It's not too difficult and it is super flexible. We have one root control, which is the master of everything, and then two other controls. One at the bottom, which I've conveniently called bottom, that will control all the bending and the position of the bottom of our rig. And the control at the top will do exactly that, except for the top of this tube. We're also going to be adding some widgets to our controls. I'll show you the long way and the fast way of doing that. And we will also practice structuring our work in the outliner in a logical way. This is so we get some practice before we do the real thing later on. Now this rig is super simple, but it is super flexible and super powerful. But I really want you to think about the concept of what's going on in this rig. This could be the entirety of your rig, like this would be very similar to a bouncing ball rig that we might create later, just with a few differences. Or this type of thing could be used as a component where we structure a lot of these and chain them together. So really think beyond this simple demonstration of what I'm showing you in this lesson. This setup is super powerful in many situations. All right, let's get started. Okay, so here is our starting file. We're just starting with a beautifully modeled cylinder that I happen to do myself. Yes, I did do this. And you look at that bevel work. That was all done by me. Hard to believe, isn't it? But you'll notice that this is our mesh. It's going to simulate our character or the part of the rig that we're going to rig up today. And you will notice that we have no transforms on our mesh. So the origin point is at the world origin. That's the best practice. And you notice that we haven't named this, but we'll do that in a later stage. We're going to rig this guy up. So we need to add in an armature. So I'm just going to choose Shift A, choose armature there. Now I can't see what's going on, so let's fix that. Let's go over to viewport display, turn on in front, make this wire so we can actually see through. And while we're here, we will turn on the bone names as well as our axes. That's just going to help us out. All right, now we're ready to position our bones. So I'm going to jump into edit mode and make sure that we have our snapping on vertex. And we're starting at the bottom, so that's where the head of our bone is. But we're going to drag our tail up here. And I want to snap it to one of the very vertices on the top. And that way I know that I'm covering 100% of the mesh and it's going to stretch beautifully. All right, I can hide my cylinder now because it's going to get in my way. We can say goodbye to him. We'll see him again later. And then I'm going to create all of our other bones that we need for this rig. So the first one I'll create is a handle at the end and then duplicate that for the bottom. So I'll just extrude this for now, even though that is technically connected to our bone called bone at the moment. I'll change that later. So the parenting is not final yet, but I will duplicate this guy and just snap him down the bottom. And then while I have him selected, I'm also going to select the top and jump to the side view and duplicate both of these bones at once and then align them to the world, these duplicates that is. So I want to change my pivot point to individual origins. And then just go R, and that will be positive 90, hit enter. So these are going to be my controls. That's going to be my bottom control to move the bottom of our cylinder around. And this is going to move the top. And we want them to be aligned with the world because that is going to help out the animators so that when they move it in the Z, it's going to move in the world Z. When they move it in the X, it's going to move in the world X, etc. It helps us tell what bone is what just from the orientation. We can look at this and say, oh, this is world aligned. This must be the control. This one is not world aligned. It's probably the mechanism. So that's almost all of my bones done. I just need one more master control or our root down the bottom. So I'm going to duplicate this guy because he's already in the right spot. And then I'm going to scale him bigger. That'll be big enough. Or actually, I'll make this a nice round number. So that is a length of 3. That's all my bones created, but I'm going to change the view over to B bone. That's going to help me see things better. And I want to shrink down some of the bones so that I can easily select the ones that sit over the top of each other. So I'm going to select our long one here and make it skinnier with Control Shift Alt S and then just shrink that down a little bit and then do the same with this middle one. And that way I can select these bones that are over the top of other bones. Now remember, that doesn't change anything. It's just a visual representation and it helps us out when we're rigging. All right, let's name some bones. So this one's going to be called root. This one here is our bottom control. So it's just going to be called bottom. This one is our top control. Let's call it top. This one here is going to be, now normally it would have a proper name, but in our example, I'm going to leave it as bone. Although this has a special purpose, it's going to be the deformation bone. So we're going to type DEF and then a hyphen, and we have labeled that one. And the only ones we have left are the handle start and the handle end. And we would normally name them after what it's connected to, or the main part of that name, which would be bone. So this one is going to be bone handle end, because that's the end of the chain, and this one's bone handle start. So bone handle start, although technically these are mechanism bones, so I forgot to put the MCH on the front, but let's do that at the same time. So I have them both selected. I'm going to bring up my batch renaming with Control F2, and then I'll change the objects over to bones, and then set a prefix under set name, and then set prefix, and then type it in here, MCH, and then hyphen, and click OK. We've added that to both of the names at once. Let's do all of the parenting now, and I'm going to start at the root bone just to make sure that it's not parented to anything, because if I move this, you can see the relationship line, so it is actually parented to something. And that was just because of the bone I duplicated it from. So I'm going to clear the parent, Alt P, and then say clear parent. And the reason I'm starting with the root bone is because it's the top of the hierarchy. And if I parent something to the root, but the root is still accidentally parented to something it shouldn't be, I may get some unexpected results. So if I make sure that the top of the hierarchy is correct, then I'm going to avoid any issues like that. All right, so I'm going to work on my handles first. So this handle should be parented to the top control. So keep offset. And then our bottom handle should be parented to our bottom control. And our deformation bone can be parented to the bottom control. And then our two controls, which is our top and bottom, can be parented to our root control. There we go. Now let's just check this out. So when we move the top, we should get that L staying intact. Same with this one here, although we've got an extra bit. That is the way that it's working. And when we move this root bone, everything should move. So far, everything is working as expected. Now let's set up this bendy bone here. So over in the bone tab, we're going to go under the bendy bones tab here. We can drag this up all the way to 32. That is the maximum, but we don't need that many for our situation. 12 is perfectly fine. Once you hit a certain number, anything above that is not really going to have much of an effect. So 12 segments is more than enough. Let's add our stretch to constraint on our def bone now. So we select the target first, then the owner. Who wants a constraint? I do. Control Shift C and then choose stretch to. And now when we move that, it should be working, yes. But we haven't connected our handles yet, but we have a bone that stretches between these two controls. Awesome, I'll just reset everything there and then connect up our handles. So I'll select our def bone again, and then down the bottom of our bendy bones, we have our start handle and our end handle. We're going to change this over to be tangent. The start handle is going to be the handle start. We'll do the same on the end, so we change it over to be tangent. And the actual bone is going to be handle end. And now you'll see we have this magic going on. Isn't that fantastic? I'll just reset everything and bring back our cylinder to connect everything again. So we want to attach this mesh to our rig here. But one thing that we'll notice, when we create a bone, every one of those bones we created has this deform option on. And that means if we try and automatically attach it to our rig, it's going to try and weight all of our bones, when really we only want one bone to have the weight on it. We can easily fix that by turning off that deformation option on everything except this bone here. So I'm going to select it and then invert that selection with Control I. So these are all the bones that shouldn't be deforming. And then I'll bring up my menu with Shift W and then toggle off the deform option. And one thing that I always do is I always go down into the redo panel and make sure that I set it to be exactly what I want. In this case, disable. And that is because if I had have turned one off already and then did that operation, it would have flipped it and turned it on. So I just want to make sure that it's turned it off on every single one that I have selected. So this deform option is no longer on any of those bones except for our deformation bone. Now we can safely attach our geometry to the rig. How do we do that? We're going to select our geometry, then select our rig and hit Control P. And we can choose automatic weights here. Click, and that is because it's going to weight that whole entire mesh to one bone. Let's check that out in the data. We can see here is our vertex group called def bone. And let's try this out. I'm going to jump into pose mode and grab this, and you'll see it is working. Excellent. That is how easy it is to set up such a flexible rig. We're not finished yet. We're going to tidy this rig up. So the first thing that we're going to do to tidy this up is put everything into bone collections. I'm going to start at the root. I'm going to select that guy, hit M to move, and then I'll create a new collection. I'll give it a name called root. Click. Let's select our two controls. Do the same thing. Hit M to move them. Let's create a new collection. We're going to call them controls. Our deformation bone, we'll do the same thing. We're going to put that on a new collection. We're just going to use DEF for that collection. Now I know I only have two mechanism bones to move here, but I want to show you one of the advantages of using a prefix on some of your special bones. I'm going to go up here to the select menu, and then you can choose select pattern. And I can also type in MCH dash and with the wildcard or the asterisk on the end, and that will select all of the bones that I wanted. Now, in our case, it was just 2 bones, but imagine if you had a rig with dozens and dozens of these bones. It will select precisely all those bones that we wanted. So that is something very handy to do. So I'm going to move these to a collection. I'm going to call it MCH. And then I think that is all my collections done. I actually don't need this bones collection anymore. I'm just going to delete the collection. And we can also hide the collections that we don't need. So we don't need the mechanism and we don't need the deformation anymore. These are just our controls. All right, so there's only 2 more things to do to our rig here before we call it final, and that is to organize our outliner as well as give some beautiful shapes and colors to our controls. I'm going to do the structure first, and when you submit this, I will be judging your structure as well. You don't need to use the same as me, but it just should be logical. All right, so I'm going to add in some collections now just by clicking this button up here. And this is going to be the master collection, which is going to be the name of the character. I don't have a name for this character, so I'm just going to call it character. Now the master collection is always going to be in capital letters, or that's my naming convention. So everything will live inside this. And then we want 2 more collections under here. We're going to have character rig underscore rig, and then character underscore geo. And now we need to name our object. So here, this is going to be the character mesh. So let's just type character geo. I will duplicate that name into the data, and then I'll drag it up there, and then I'll name our rig. This is going to be character rig. I'll copy that name and then paste it into the data, and I'll drag that guy in there. So now we have 1 master collection that has 2 sub collections. The character rig is inside the rig folder. The geometry is inside the geometry folder. I said folder, but I mean collection. And now I just want to put this in 2 places. So I always do that down here under the object tab collections. This is grayed out because we need to be in object mode for this. And then click plus and then choose what collection we want it to be in. I'll choose the master collection. And now you'll see when these are collapsed, this rig lives inside 2 spots. And that is a structure I would use for this mock character. Let's do some widgets as well as some bone colors. Now in this next little bit, you do not need to follow along because I'm going to show you the long way of doing one widget, and then I'm going to use the add-on that I created that makes it super duper fast. So just sit back and relax on this bit, but I'm going to create a compass widget that is going to represent our root control here. I will speed up the recording a little bit for this section so you're not totally bored, but I'm going to add in a circle, then jump into edit mode. I am terrible at modeling, but I'm going to do 1 section of this arrow and then mirror that to the other 3 points. I'll do that by subdividing the edges and snapping those verts into place. And then I can delete the parts I don't want and use the mirror modifier on 2 axes, that's the X and the Y, and apply that to make the vertices real. Then I can select them all, duplicate them, and rotate them 90 degrees. Then select them all again and merge them to get rid of all of the doubles. And you can see I accidentally created that widget in the wrong collection. So what I would normally do is create a collection specifically for the widgets, which would have the prefix and then the character name. I don't actually put the widget collection inside the master collection because when you link this rig into a file, you don't actually need those shapes to be present. So if they are there, it's just going to be 1 extra collection that you don't need in that file. So I always leave it outside the master collection. And now we can go back to normal speed for when I add that shape to the bone. So let's go back into our rig. Let's go bone. Let's go viewport display, and then let's go custom object and go click. Now you'll see it's probably a little bit big. So we could change the scale to make it something more reasonable, something like that. And that is how we would do 1 widget. Imagine if you've got hundreds of controls. There must be a quicker way. There is. Let me show you the fast way of doing this. Okay, so I've undone a few steps, and now we're going to add our widgets using the bone widget add-on. It's super easy to do. Click on here and then choose a root. So there we go, there's our compass shape. And then we click create, and we can set the size if we want. There we go, a little bit smaller, something like that will do. And these ones here, I'm going to do them both at the same time. I'm going to choose a circle for these controls and then click create. They're oriented in the wrong direction, but we can just fix that by rotating them around 90 degrees. And this size, just make them a little bit smaller. Boom, there we go. We've done those widgets. You see it's automatically created the collection for us. It's created the names, and we don't have to worry about anything. We just click the button and it does all the work. Wasn't that much easier? Yes, it was. All right, so let's set up some colors. Our root control, let's go over to our bone. Under viewport display, bone color, let's choose the red theme for that one. And let's do these ones as yellow. So I have them both selected, but choose one for yellow and then click this button here to make them yellow. That is our bendy stretchy rig. I will turn off our names, our axes, and the final thing that we're going to do, it's always nicer if we change our controls from quaternion, so we don't have 4 rotation channels, we only have 3. So we're going to hold down Alt and then click Euler XYZ. Boom, there we go, finished rig. Wasn't that fun?